it covers 317 companies. Now, these are American and Canadian companies in this study, so it's not global companies, but Lean In and McKinsey are working on moving toward finding more information on global companies. Over 12 million people were part of these companies from which these results in the talent pipeline was studied. And so what you can see here is that, it's telling us what companies are doing to support their employees in COVID, the dynamics that are driving both women and men and senior level women, and some recommended strategies. These are the challenges and the solutions that we're going to talk about and examine. So on the left, you can see challenges, the broken rung. Does anybody out there know what we mean by the broken rung? We'll talk about it in the presentation itself, but I thought I'd ask, what's the broken rung? Anybody?
It's that first step on the ladder to management, being promoted to a manager role.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Karen. That's right. And that's what challenges women down the road. When you start out behind, then can we really catch up? We're going to see that the talent pipeline shows declines. Women are leaving the workforce. There's a lot of pressure and anxiety. COVID has really been super difficult, right? Treacherous. Women in senior leadership is an interesting information. We'll find out about that. We'll also talk about Black and Latino women and the kind of pressures that they're under that might be different than other women. Microaggressions, what those look like. Also, we mentioned something about women with disabilities. A lot of times we think about diversity and we can't forget that you've got able and disabled. And that is something we need to really feel more comfortable and identify with. And then companies are not doing enough to mitigate burnout. I know women are starting to think about leaving the workforce. And then on the solution side, we'll talk about some solutions and leave with 6 things that we can participate in, even if our companies may not fully adopt them yet, but we can certainly help as we manage our own teams. Okay. So let's start out with the whole purpose of the study, which is to determine what % of women there are at every position in the ladder. So you can see here, you start at the entry level, and this is managerial positions. So for example, the entry level does not include hourly employees. Maybe you might think of people who are in operations and paid hourly, or even in some customer service centers where people are paid hour. We're looking here at the management and professional employees. So at entry level, women in the 2020 study were at 47%. And as you move up, you see it declines to 38%, 33%. And by the time you are at the C-suite, you're at 21%. Also, I want to point out white women versus women of color. So you can see at the entry level, women of color are about 18%, and it gets down to 3% when you talk about women in the C-suite. So any thoughts, reactions? Amanda, I see that you're out there. Maybe you can help me with the chat and just kind of take a look at the, get some feedback from our participants. Kelly, you're out there too, and you're an awesome assistant and helper. So if you can manage the chat and just let us know people who have comments about these numbers. We're gonna also compare here on this next slide. How did that change versus last year? So what I did here is I took last year's 2019 study and I compared it to 2020. And I put an X where things declined and a check mark where things increased. So you can see at the entry level, we had a decline of 1 percentage point in women at the entry level. As you move up, managers stayed flat. Senior manager, director declined as well as VP. Now we did make progress at SVP, so we had a 2 percentage point increase in women at that level in these 317 companies. If you go to women of color, I'm sorry, white women come first, white women, similar types of results on the lower and middle end, flat at VP. And again, they did have increases in both the SVP level and the C-suite. So very positive results. And typically over the long term, what we've seen happen is we have about a 1 percentage point improvement every year, if you looked historically on average. And so here you can see we are benefiting at the top end. Now we can look at women of color, and on the lower levels, they remain flat. So on the positive side, we didn't decline at the lower levels. We did decline at the VP level. And then you can see here flat at the SVP, and we declined 1 percentage point at the C-suite. Hi, we just had a couple of people join. Thank you for coming in. We're just looking at the change in the talent pipeline from 2019 to 2020. And on this slide, you can see we did have some declines. So I'd like to hear from you all. Does somebody have a comment you want to mention? Does this surprise you? Do you see this kind of thing in your own company? No surprise from Robin. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I think for me as a woman, yeah, go ahead.
Hey, it's Kelly Gonter. Kathleen Lee Lawarczyk has a good question. Can you talk more about the 317 companies?
Yes, I would love to. So the beautiful thing about this report is that McKinsey, as you all are very familiar with, they are, big time consulting company. Large organizations pay them a lot of money. They do a great job. So in the report itself, which you can access online as a PDF, it gives you a great deal of information about the company. So the 370 companies are across the US and Canada. It's on similar research that's been conducted annually since 2015. So as you compare year to year, they followed a very similar methodology. Let's see, if you look at the segmentation of companies, it'll even tell you how many companies from all the different sectors. So for example, asset management and institutional investors, 29 companies, and it goes through and tells you every different kind of company they had. And in here, they do talk about how the data is normalized, or so that the information is comparable. Does that answer the question? There's a whole bunch more information in here on exactly, here's, overall metrics. You can, as a percentage, you can also find out what percentage of different industries are included in the total. And they compare it to the weighting of the Fortune 500. So that's how they normalize it.
Great. It just sounds like there is a cross section of a bunch of different industries, but largely very large corporations. And then as a follow-on to that, I'm curious if any of those particular columns have been consolidated. I'm actually glad that you have senior manager and director together, because I've seen in business a lot of director levels being removed and replaced with senior managers. So I'm curious if anything in other of those particular columns that are similar in nature that might reflect your results.
They are absolutely there's an agenda, legend. Let's see, I just undid this. Okay, so I'm going to read this to you too. There's a whole list of exactly how they classify the positions. I'm going to read just a couple of them so you kind of get a sense of how they consolidate. L1, the executives, that's on the far right. Those are going to be very simple. We're familiar with, right? A CEO, C-level. But if you look at, for example, as vice president, which is the level 3 VP, it says vice presidents and other similar roles, leaders within the organization responsible for activities, initiatives within a subunit of a business unit or function, who report directly to senior vice presidents. And as another example, let's do some of the lower level ones. What they define as a manager, which is the second one. Managers are junior managers and contributors responsible for small teams and or functional units or operations. And then it'll define senior managers are seasoned managers and contributors with responsibility for multiple teams and discrete functions or operating units. And so it is very detailed on how they define that. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And please do chime in, everyone, at any time if you have a question. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the broken rung. I saw a couple of people weren't quite familiar with what that broken rung means. And so you can hear, they've got this image. A broken rung makes it harder to advance, as the image displays. Men advance past manager and to manager faster than women. And you can see here that it says for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 85 women are promoted, 71 Latinas are promoted. For every 100 men promoted to manager, only 58 Black women are promoted. And so what happens is that's why we end up where we've only got 38% women in manager versus 62% men in manager. And that's, if you remember right here it is 38% women at the manager level, but here you have white women and men of color are much higher. And part of the study they found is that 2 million women are actually considering leaving the workforce, taking a leave of absence, because things have gotten so challenging during the COVID environment. And so it has been grueling, and the statistics bear it out, not only in the pipeline statistics you just saw, but one other part of the study is that they interviewed 40,000 men and women at these companies to get a sense of these other things that are happening besides, just what percent are you in management at your company, right? But what are you going through during this COVID environment? And so here's the things that employees are saying. So if you are feeling this way, it's not just you, right? The biggest challenges, the anxieties that we feel are that we may get laid off, or there's going to be furloughs. We are burned out, mental health issues, childcare and homeschooling, healthcare of our loved ones that we have to be worried about, our aging parents who we haven't been even able to see. And of course, financial security as well. And on the right, what about at work? What's happening? There's a lack of flexibility. And what's interesting is we suddenly, the silver lining of COVID is that we were able to suddenly be accepted to work from home all the time. But within that, there's a pressure to always be on. There's so much housework. There's a lot of performance from the caregiving that we have to give, not only at home, but again, taking care of our parents. Many of us have parents that live in other places, and we may have gone out to see them, and now we can't see them as often to watch how they're doing. This one's a big one too. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th bullet point, discomfort from sharing our challenges. What women face, and you'll see shortly, is that it's difficult for us to speak up about these challenges and pressures we're facing at home, because we'll be penalized, right? We will be penalized for it. Women at work are feeling blindsided by decisions that are affecting day-to-day work. I think that senior leaders, where they're male dominated, may not really have a sense of how difficult it is for women with children, women with other responsibilities, and they'll make decisions and you just find out about them without recognition of what it could do to the person at home. And the last one, we're unable to bring our whole self to work, especially Black women. So we're going to look a little bit into that. Kelly Gonter, thank you so much for pasting in the PDF link for the Women in the Workplace report. And like I said, if you look in the back, it tells you all the methodology in great detail. Okay, so we are going to do another poll here. And what we are going to try to find out is mothers, fathers, and their perspectives on things. So in this poll, I want to ask you a question. More than 70% of fathers think they are splitting household labor equally. What percentage of women think fathers are splitting household labor equally, right? So it's the difference between what fathers think they're doing and what mothers think the fathers are doing. So this is going to be interesting, and then I'll share the results from the study. And again, this was asking the 40,000 employees, which is a very good sample size of working parents. Okay, so we've got 94% voted. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and let's see what you all say. So here are the results on your screens. It looks like 56% think 16%. And oh, isn't that interesting? 44% think 44%. That's crazy numbers. Okay, so let's see what the actual results are. Okay, so here's the distribution of labor for heterosexual parents and dual career couples. And so you can see in the gray section that more than 70%, 72% of fathers think they are splitting household labor equally with their partner during COVID, but only 44% of mothers say the same thing. And then in the orange down in the bottom, women are 3 times more likely to be responsible for most of the housework and caregiving. So what are some comments around that? Are you all feeling the similar way? Does your partner feel like they do equivalent amount of housework and childcare?
And this isn't a COVID thing. This is just a general thing, right? I mean, you think this is?
Well, they did it right now, right? So the survey happened this year while COVID was happening. So I would imagine that there's a COVID effect, but even before this, you're right. If you looked at the surveys from before, there is a disconnection between the perception of men and women and what they do in the workplace. I mean, even when
this is based on COVID research during COVID, but in my mind, I just wonder how the percentages differ from 2019, in a more normal environment, were the percentages as, because this is more about perception, but it's also about the share of work at home. So I just wonder how much. I feel like a lot of mothers have been far more impacted with COVID with childcare than that. The kids are home now and the husband just defaults to them taking care of them, even though they still have a full-time job. Not a fault of the husband, just like their brain doesn't go there. I read in this thing, it's like, one of the women said, one of us is going to have to quit our jobs to figure out how to take care of the kids. And the husband, it didn't even enter the husband's mind that they needed to figure that out together versus the mother being the party that dealt with the childcare. So just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is. I would tell you that back when Cheryl first wrote her book, Lean In 2013, she had examples back then, very similar statistics. So I think you're right. It's always been there. I think it's going to be more strongly visible, the disparity in the percentages. And I think there's going to be a lot of studies done on this, right? To be able to see what happened and the before and after. Okay, the next one is that mothers are more likely than fathers to feel judged for caregiving during COVID, right? So basically it says, since the start of the crisis, what % of parents have experienced, number 1, discomfort sharing work-life challenges? Only 19% of dads feel discomfort to have to talk about the life challenges they're having at home when they're at work. Mothers are 29% or 1.5 more times likely to say there's discomfort in sharing work-life challenges at work. So I have a question. Why would women and mothers feel more discomfort than men to share work-life challenges? Why? Somebody put something in the chat. Or feel free to speak up. Why is it that women would feel 1.5 times more discomfort in talking about the work-life challenges that they're facing right now?
I think that men are almost like sometimes like celebrated or rewarded for like stepping up and helping take care of their kids, versus women still feel like it's more like it's our job and we just need to keep quiet about it.
Yep. Thank you so much. That is so true, right? So when men are looked upon like, oh, he's such a dedicated father, wow, they're more probably not feeling so uncomfortable having to talk about it, right? They're going to get recognition. But when women speak up about challenges they face at home, they will be penalized. No doubt about it. There is research showing that women are penalized when they bring up issues at home, right? the perception is they're not going to be as dedicated to the work. You know, they have all these responsibilities at home, and therefore we just don't talk about it, right? But what does that mean? That means pressure's building up, right? The next one, you know, again, what percent of parents, right, worry about performance being judged because they're having all these caregiving responsibilities? Only 11% of men worry about performance penalties, but 24% of women, 2 times more, worry about penalties. Discomfort sharing status as a parent, again, 2.6 times more women feel discomfort and pressure. So non-parent caregivers face stigmas too, right? So it's not just having children and family at home. If you're caring for elderly relatives, you're also going to worry that your performance is going to be judged more negatively because of these responsibilities, right? You're not dedicated enough. You have all these distractions going on. Okay. Oh, wait, I had a comment here. Kelly said, maybe because they're doing 1.5% less. Love it. Okay, next. So now I mentioned earlier, we were going to talk a little bit about Latina and Black mothers. And so here they have a much heavier burden to shoulder. More likely, they're going to be the family's sole breadwinner. Latina mothers are 1.6 times more likely than white mothers to be responsible for all child care and household work. So back when we said that, you know, 70% of fathers thought they were doing equal work. Well, for Latina and mothers especially, they're more at risk that they're doing all the work at home. And Black mothers are twice as likely to be handling all of this for their families, right? So Latinas, 1.6 times more likely they do it all, and Black women, twice as likely that they do it all. And so what I think here in this space that we find ourselves in, to be empathetic and to be allies, is we have to understand and see what other people go through. And I like this slide and this information, because if we don't associate with Hispanic women and Black women on a regular basis, if they're not part of our you know, friends and emailing with them, well, we don't know what they're going through. And so especially there's income issues here too, right? Lower income people are just going to have more challenges. So I like this slide because it just helps me understand that my experience is not what other people may be feeling. So now we're going to jump into a little bit about senior level women. So we talk a lot about the lower end of the pipeline. And sometimes I think we think, well, gosh, senior level women, you know, they can figure it all out. You know, nothing stops them. But guess what? In this study, right, what they're finding is that senior level women are burning out too at a higher rate than senior level men. So here's the question: in the past few months, the percent of employees who have consistently felt, number one, pressured to work more. So senior level women, 36% said they feel pressured to work more, versus senior men, only 27% felt they had to work more. Exhausted, senior level women, 54% said they felt exhausted, only 41% men, and then burned out, 39% senior women, 29% men. Senior level women are significantly more likely than men at the same level to feel under pressure, to be always on, and to, you know, think about downshifting their careers and actually, you know, taking a leave of absence or leaving the workforce. Okay, here's another, you know, really interesting information, again, to help us as allies and supporting our workforce in its entirety, being more inclusive. Black women often don't feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work. Black women feel more excluded at work, and they are less likely to say they can bring their whole selves to work. Black women experience a wider range of microaggressions. For example, they're twice as likely to hear colleagues express surprise at their language skills or other abilities. And you know, this word microaggressions, I think sometimes it's hard for us to know what that means. And I like this statement because this is an example, right? You can imagine you're just, you know, somebody tells you, oh, you know, you have great communication skills in that meeting. And, you know, this person, this Black woman may just be doing what everybody else does, right? And so it's like, well, gosh, you don't think that Black women could speak as good as anybody else? So let's see what this information had in it. Again, this is statements from employees. Do you agree with this? What percent of the employees agree with this? So the statement is, number one, I feel uncomfortable sharing my thoughts about racial inequality or inequity, right? All men, only 14% say they feel uncomfortable sharing thoughts. But look at Black women, 42%, you know, and they're the ones who are so impacted by racial inequity, have to live it, have to see their children live it. And almost half or 42% are uncomfortable sharing that weight that they carry. The next one, I feel uncomfortable sharing my experience of grief or loss. Black women, 15% higher than the others. And then the last one, I feel like I can't talk about the impact current events are having on me or people in my community. So you can see the big difference between Black women, 22% feel they can't talk about it versus only 9 or 7%, right? So back early on, you know, let's call it, you know, maybe the May timeframe when things were so in the news and, you know, riots and everything. Think of the pressure. And you know, we had no problem if you're, you know, in a majority group talking about it. And, oh, did you see this news story? Did you see that story? And we just talk about it with our friends. But if you were a Black woman, you felt so much pressure to not even bring it up. Right. I see some comments in the chat here. I hope you all are looking at the chat. These are great comments. It's hard to present in chat, but here, exhausting daily code. Oh, I love this. Robin, thank you for sharing this. She said the exhausting daily code switching. Right. So you're constantly having to be on or behave this way or that way. Yeah. Companies generally do not create safe spaces for this. Thank you so much for sharing these comments. Okay. Next one. Many employees see themselves as allies to women of color, but we aren't taking enough action. Right. So now I am a woman of color. I'm a Latina, I'm Hispanic. I was born outside the country. You know, and I like to think I'm pretty much out there and speaking up, being courageous. But when I show you the types of things we should be doing, this is an opportunity for us to, again, empathy and recognize maybe we can do more. So let's look at this one. It says, what percent of employees say they are allies to women of color? And then we're going to compare that to consistently doing certain things that would be considered ally actions. Okay, so what percentage of employees think that they're allies? So 65% of women and 61% of men say, hey, I'm an ally to women of color at my work, right? I do it. So we're gonna just kind of focus on this. I'm gonna focus on the women. So 65% say we're allies. Now, let's ask those women, I actively listen to the personal stories of women of color about bias and mistreatment, right? So what percent of women say that? Only 52%, right? And what does this mean? In order to do this, actively listen to personal stories about women of color on bias and mistreatment, we actually have to, one, have women of color in our circle of influence where we are frequently talking to them, right? Not just, you know, who do we associate with? I know we can't go to dinner very often now, but when we could, you know, who do we have lunch with? Who do we have coffee with? Who do we have dinner with? But it's not only being physically with them or on Zoom, but listening to stories of bias and mistreatment, right? And so what could you do? You might say to a Black woman at coffee, you know, I want to understand, I'm seeking to understand, how is your experience at my company different from my experience? Can you share with me a little bit? And then you have that interaction, right? You might talk about, how is your experience different when you apply for a promotion versus what I might experience? And just listen and let them talk. Okay, next one. I publicly acknowledge or give credit to women of color for their ideas and work, right? So how many times are we in a Zoom meeting and a Black woman brings up an idea And do we sit there and say, oh, Susan, what a great idea that is, right? That's something we can do that's pretty easy, or just support them. I see discrimination against women of color, and I actively work to confront it. Now things are getting serious, right? How many times do we actually put our reputation and our credibility on the line by standing up and saying something when we see something that isn't fair? The next one, I take a public stand to support racial equality, right? So let's take a simple public stand. We don't have to go out and, don our masks and put up a big sign and go in a march. But we could do something like on LinkedIn, right? Go out and search for information and post it. And even if you don't make a comment, I think posting it goes a long way. I like this. Another great comment from Robin. She said, listening without the intent to justify, defend, or justify or react. Yep, just listening. Okay, last one. I mentor or sponsor one or more women of color. So that's a great one. I think we touched on this earlier when I was telling you what we were going to learn about, right? So what can you do to sponsor a woman of color, a junior woman? Just reach out to somebody and say, hey, I would love to learn more about you and help you in your career. Let's do 30-minute mentorships, every other week for 2 months. There's an idea. I do that a lot at work. I do 30-minute mentorships for a set time period. And then lastly, I want to touch on a little bit from the study where they remind us about it's been especially difficult for women with disabilities. And you can see here a quote that, I'm barely hanging on. I recently let my direct manager know about my disability, and I'm glad that he is aware, so he knows I'm not as accessible on some weeks. But it was very difficult for me to tell him, because this is a job where people will stop giving you work on a dime if they perceive that you're weak. And so, that's a lot of information. And so I wonder, well, what can we really do about it? And I see somebody else. I just noticed another thing. Kathleen Lee says, great idea on offering mentorships. I'm hoping to be a mentor if you have people in mind. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Kathleen. So what can we do about it, right? There are things we can do. And so the study itself lists the things in the gray boxes, and I came up with just a one-word description of what I see it as, right? Number one, make work more sustainable. If we have to do more, work harder, always be on, we've got to find ways to make it more acceptable and possible for our mental health, for our physical well-being, right? And so we've got to get creative. So certainly as leaders, or if you even manage a small team, what can you do on your team to make things more sustainable? And I would argue, I picked the word creativity because it requires us to be creative. Why not co-create with your team? So one thing I've been doing is I make sure I'm constantly checking in with my team, and we talk about things that are in the news related to COVID and stress reducers. I sent them articles on, hey, here's 5 things that you can do to reduce your stress levels. And then we talk about it on our team huddles. We have daily team huddles that are 15 minutes long where we just kind of decompress. I make sure that I check in with them daily. And then I ask them, hey, what do you guys want to do? So one day I suggested, hey, I know it's tough, but what if we meet up at the office? We have a giant outdoor, beautiful garden. Let's meet up and have lunch. I'll cater it, and we'll, be sure to stand 10 feet apart, but at least we can see each other. And it was a mixed bag because a lot of people were still uncomfortable, and that's great. So we didn't do it, but at least they knew I was thinking about them for ways to get outside of the pressures we're feeling in our houses. Number 2, reset norms around flexibility. Support your people, right? Maybe before COVID, we thought this is how flexible working would be. But after COVID, it's just different, right? We might have to reset how we think about it and support our teams in every way that they need to be customized for their situation. Reassess. This is a toughie because for executives out there who, we're diehard, we get results, it's about the numbers. And what this one is about is that we need to take a close look at performance reviews. Just like I said that flexibility before and after, well, maybe performance reviews need to be reassessed, right? Things are different. We need to take a look at performance reviews. And there's a lot of work out there of what companies are doing. Awareness, take steps to minimize gender bias. Even just showing this presentation as an example to your teams, right? To let them know what's going on with men and women at work, with working parents. This would be a great awareness step to help your teams minimize gender bias. Transform, adjust your policies and programs to better support your employees, and empathy, as we talked a few times, that if we can find knowledge about other people who are different than us, it helps us understand better their point of view, right? And it helps us communicate better with our entire teams, which may have diverse people in them. And so here we go. This is the last, I think, second to last slide. I just wanted to mention that Levi Strauss has a great program on allyship. Remember how the study shows us that we may think that we're allies, but what are we doing really to be allies? And a lot of times we don't know what to do. And so at Levi, they have these regular work sessions where they help executives and all employees and managers learn what are some actual actions that they can take to become an ally and to foster a culture that really supports especially Black women. So with that, I want to leave a couple of minutes. Here's the recap of what we covered, and I'll be happy to make this presentation available to you. So on the Eventbrite, I'll be able to send you a link and you'll be able to download this PowerPoint deck. I would love for you to share it with your teams. Like I said, don't hesitate to use the material and cover it in one of your meetings. What else? Do we have any questions out there? I want to make sure I give you time for some questions. Twyla talked about the pay equity, definitely pay equity for Black women. Yep, that has not been addressed. Absolutely. And yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Elba. I'm Angela. So, one of the things I'm thinking through is I'm an African-American woman. I've been working in corporate America over 25 years. I've gotten to where I am without allies or without feeling like I had allies. And so as we were going through this presentation, part of me was saying, it's almost like, so what? Like, just do it. Like, get over it. Get over the fact that you don't have allies. And what it made me think about was some of the we will face in trying to change the conversation and change these numbers is that people who have gone through their entire careers and gotten to that senior level role, like we've almost got to look back and say, okay, they shouldn't have to play by the same rules and run the same gauntlets that we did. Like, but that's some fixing in me to get my mind to shift and say, okay, let's talk about that. Let's figure out how it can be easier for you, right?
Oh, Angela, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so true and brave, because what you're bringing up is what I can't tell you how many women I talk to, right? And they're like, I didn't get that help. And here I am, I'm a CEO. And you know what I say? That's great. That's great. But why does it have to still be that way, right? Why does it still have to be that way? This woman once told me her daughter asked her, she was like, that's the mother said that. And the daughter said, but mom, why does it still have to be that way, right? Why do we have to have experiences like that? And Angela, I'm going to give you one more example. So many times people tell me when the conversation of Black men in prison comes up, and they tell me, what's the standard answer from white people? Well, they do all the crimes, right? And so that shortchanges the incredible amount of information that comes into play with that, right? It's so complicated. And I feel the same way about women at the top, right? It's like, look, yeah, you can get it yourself and you can get there, but the average, all women will not benefit until the playing field is level, right? And we are truly inclusive and have equal access to the opportunities. And that's where ShowMe50 works on changing policies and practices to make the talent management process truly a level playing field. Thank you, Angela, so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any comments verbally or It's 12:45, so feel free to drop off when you need to drop off, but I'll be here if anybody has any other questions or comments.
There was a question that Kathleen posted about, is there any study of women of size?
Women of size, as in, okay, here's a moment for me, right? What do you,
Yeah. So
does
I'll
that
talk a little bit more. Yep, I'll say a little bit more about that. However you want to use the terminology, but women who are larger, I think there's
of
already,
course,
yeah,
for sure, right? And when it comes down to it, it's people who are different than the majority group wherever you're at, your company, your church, whatever. If you look, sound, in some way, you're different country, different weight, different height, right? You are now not fitting in. And that's where biases start to come in. So there is no doubt there's studies. Dove, clearly you all have probably seen the Dove commercials. I know that they've got studies. Also, I want to mention that Dove just came out. They've got the Crown Initiative. Does anybody here know what that stands for? Oh my God, I wish I could quickly go to their website, but Crown is about, it was in the newspaper this weekend. It just passed the US House of Representatives, making it illegal to discriminate against hair. Okay, one of the challenges Black women face is how they look with their hair, braids. And Angela, maybe you can help me, because I,
Yeah,
natural hair,
yeah,
natural hair,
natural hair.
natural hair, but
With
braids is a big
locks
thing.
and twists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you know what? Listen, look at me. I think we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm embarrassed that I don't know all the right terms, but I know enough to know that this is something that we need to fix. A young woman I work with is Black, and she told me a story that one time her boss made these horrible comments about her hair. It's like, what's up with that, right?
Well, even Black women's own perception of, at least from my point of view, of their hair looking natural is not their natural hair. That movie Hair, it was a movie. Can't remember. And in it, Black women said, I want my hair to look more natural. And it was saying, I want my hair to look straighter, right? Like, and it was like, no, embrace, we all need to be supportive of everybody embracing their own natural state of beauty. So.
That's right. Just to bring your authentic self to work.
Look, I don't think anyone can solve solve the relationship that Black women have with our hair, right? Like that's not for the world to solve, right? But it should be okay to wear my hair however I want, right? And we've got to feel comfortable with that, but it also should not be the focus of a conversation. I came in with my hair different one day. A senior vice president stopped by, a vice president stopped by, and as another director, and they were like at my door talking about my hair. And thank goodness I have a very strong personality and all of that. Like it was just like, okay, enough, like be gone. I could say that to them, but most of us do not feel comfortable making any kind of change or showing anything authentic about ourselves because we feel like we don't want to get involved in the conversation about it. If I'm still trying to deal with it, why would I want to, educate everyone else, right? So I think it's just certain things shouldn't even be a part of the conversation. You could just say, wow, you look beautiful. I love your braids.
Yep,
And that's
exactly.
And I have a comment on that as well.
Yes.
I think it just kind of goes back to a period of time when to be accepted in the corporate workplace, you had to assimilate to a norm that wasn't of the African-American culture. And so therefore we straighten our hair, if there's days that I get on and my hair is like out to here, like an afro, and maybe somebody might feel a little threatened because my hair is big, but it's just in its more natural state. So I just think now we're coming of age where we're being recognized for our differences and being accepted for them.
Thank
And
goodness.
that's a good thing.
Yep. And look, thank you. Somebody, maybe Amanda or Kelly, put the link and found it on the web. So I pulled it up. It's on my screen. I love the acronym CROWN, creating a respectful and open world with no racism. Right. So to Angela's point, it's like, hair should not be a thing that's a conversation. It's not for men, right? Do we really talk about men's hair all the time? But this is another example of something that you could take to your work teams and just like, it's in the news and it's like, hey, I want to bring you, what do you guys think about this? Did you even know about this? Right. Anyway, okay. Well, thanks. Any other closing questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And have a wonderful day. And let's go out there and be great allies.
Thank you, Elba.
Okay.
Thanks, Elba. It was awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.